Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Salim Al-Qasimi from the Abu Dhabi Quality and Conformity Council. I'm the Acting Director of Product Conformity. I'd like to welcome you all on this session titled Sustainability as a Quality Imperative. I'd like to remind all the panelists as well as the participants that everything here is on the record and could be used for media distribution. So starting off with this session, the objective of today's plenary is to look at what are the sustainability standards that contribute to economic development. Also to understand how and why a sustainable economy is a core objective of Abu Dhabi's Economic Vision 2030. With that, I'm very pleased and honored to present and give a brief on our panelists this afternoon. Starting from my left, Dr. Kamal Hussein. Dr. Kamal is the chairperson of the European Association of National Metrology Institute in the United Kingdom. Dr. Kamal has extensive experience of advisory work for government. He has served on various high-level national and international committees and is the chairperson for the European Metrology Research Association, Emirate. Emirate serves the promotion of science and research and European cooperation in the fields of metrology. Thank you for joining us today, Doctor. Ms. Holly Chant. Ms. Holly is the Executive Director of Corporate Sustainability at KEO International Consultants here in the United Arab Emirates. Holly heads a team of 17 sustainability experts. She is principal in charge of sustainability projects throughout the Gulf and Malaysia. Previously, Ms. Chant was planning manager at the Urban Planning Council in Abu Dhabi, working with the initiative Istidama, which is a sustainability building and communities initiative. And I had the great honor of working with Holly previously at the UPC. Mr. Shahram Maralani, the Regional Manager for the Middle East, East Africa, Central and West Asia of DNV Business Assurance in the UAE. Mr. Maralani has over 16 years of experience in different industries, including food, packaging, automotive, testing, finance, investment and management consultancy. Over the last few years, DNV has been helping companies in the region organize and improve their sustainability reporting process. Dr. Harold Müller-Witt, the CEO of Zero Emissions Incorporation in Germany. Zero Emissions mission is to develop and realize green energy projects across Europe and the US. The main focus of Zero Emissions are the fields of large-scale solar power plants, wind parks, biogas energy, and leap jump innovations. Last but not least, Ms. Sally Patterson, the head of Business Planning and Strategy at the National Bank of Abu Dhabi. Ms. Patterson has the responsibility for the 4 key areas of strategy and corporate performance management: quality, business excellence, sustainability, policy, and process management. Sally has 30 years of experience within working in banks in the United Kingdom as well as Abu Dhabi. With that, I'd like to start the session by asking Dr. Kamal, how can standards and regulations help meet goals for sustainability in general?
Thank you very much, Chairman. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and nice to see people here who are so keen and interested to develop a dialogue in this important area of sustainability. Probably very first of all, I would like to just say I come from the UK's National Physical Laboratory, which is the National Metrology Institute, and I chair the European Association of Metrology Institutes, which has got 37 member countries and almost 101 laboratories who are members of the organization. And we have something like 6,000 metrologists as part of that association. But you might say, well, why is he talking about metrology? We're talking about sustainability. But really, there is a very close link with sustainability and metrology, because you heard this morning that unless you can measure it, you cannot manage it. So how are you going to make something sustainable if you don't know how to measure it? And I'll come back to that in a minute again. But the other point is that sustainability is something that's embedded in many kinds of areas, and it can be developed by new products, it can be developed by new processes, and so on. So the big issue for an emerging economy, for example, you might get lots of ideas from people saying, we ought to do this or we ought to do that. Now, you've got to somehow work out how are you going to assess the impact of that activity in terms of sustainability. So it may have a small impact, it may have a large impact. And somehow you've got to work out what is right for your economy, because your economy will not have the same requirements as the economy in the UK or in many countries in Europe or US and so on. So it's got to be very much linked to the country's own economic requirements. So standards are very important for this, and many of the times the standards are actually defining what should be done and what the product should have. But in order to implement those standards, you need to work out some way of measuring. So if someone says, I now have a construction material that's got very good thermal efficiency, will give you sustainability by reducing heat loss, you need to be able to measure it to be able to say how it's happening. In Europe, for example, sustainability is defined, sorry, not sustainability, the directives or the regulations in the same way we had this morning from the UK, that the requirements are not legal to the details. So it actually defines a broad kind of approach, which then pulls out the standards. So if it says buildings should be energy efficient, how do you prove your building is energy efficient? And then you've got to really look at standards which can be used to demonstrate that the buildings are energy efficient. In Europe, many countries are now building zero energy buildings. And one of the questions we are always asking, how do you know it's zero energy? So in that sense, if you're going to have a standard is a good way to implement the sustainability goal. But if you're going to have a standard, then you need to underpin the standard by having measurements. I suppose the other thing about the emerging economies is that you don't always have to have high tech. Innovation is very important. And innovation is not about new technologies only. So don't worry if you don't have the highest technologies at the moment, but what you could have is the way of putting things together. And if I give you a very simple example, you'll know what I mean. Before Apple came with their iPhone and iPad and all the family of products, all the technology was there. The way they put it and put it into the market created the innovation. So innovation is about your vision almost, about what to do and what if, meaning what if I do this, gives you the idea. And in the standards and the sustainability field, you should be thinking the same way. So I give you another example of what's happening in the UK, for example. The National Health Service is looking at sustainability in sort of the use of medicine, the way the patients are cared and so on. And you can go for high technology, have the highest or the best pharmaceutical product that we apply to cure people's diseases. But what can also be seen that maybe one can use something like telehealth. And that way you can reduce a lot of transport of people, the way people's patients are seen by doctors and so on. So telemedicine is going to be one of the ways you can innovate and you can bring in sustainability that you might not have thought about. So innovation is very important, and then you need to really look at ways of, so you need to look at ways of determining what is happening. The standards, the other thing that is very important, I think it came out in this morning's discussion, is that it's no good having your national or regional standards. You really have to look for international standards. And international standards is something that you can participate by having the people who are able to participate in the international forum to be able to hold their corner. So in that sense, the building up of people capability and the infrastructure is very important. So metrology underpins standards, it underpins the quality system that we are talking about. And what you need, as again, very first speaker this morning said that institutional excellence is important. So it's very important that you look at your metrology institute as a way of creating the excellence that you need. And we have a workshop tomorrow morning, and I thought I'd put in a plug for you to attend that, because you will see the kind of things that we will be discussing, which will be very important for standards, sustainability, and innovation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Doctor. Holly, as you know, the Abu Dhabi Economic Vision 2030 identifies the optimization of the Emirates' resources as an important role. Can you elaborate a bit on that and comment on how standards in general play an important role within achieving this goal?
Sure. The Plan Economic 2030 very clearly articulates the importance of the preservation of the environment, and the role that I've played in the private sector here in Abu Dhabi for the past 4 years is very much about ensuring that the environment is protected. But today what I'd actually like to really focus on initially, which is why I believe standards are so critically important in the transition from diversifying from petroleum to a more diverse economy, is simply because of the tremendous value that petroleum has in this moment to the Emirate. In other words, the transition that we need to go through here requires us to very preciously guard the assets that the Emirate has. Now, of course, as an environmentalist, the ones that are closest to my heart and the intent of my work are the natural environment in terms of the ecology, saving water, saving energy. But I would like to be more explicit in terms of that if the Emirate evolves its built environment without really paying very careful attention to the amount of energy that we're using, we stand the risk of exploiting our petroleum wealth indiscriminately in such a way that potentially by 2030 we don't actually have enough of this resource of petroleum left to really provide the economic engine to continue beyond 2030. Because there's a lot to accomplish between now and 2030. It's really a blink of an eye. So if you look at standards for sustainability and going back to more traditional applications, I'd like to point out just how important it is that everything that we do in the built environment is anchored in standards that are not only of an international quality, as my colleague previously mentioned, but also that these standards are very rigorously enforced in Abu Dhabi, and that each government authority and every entity in the private sector has a commitment of social responsibility to ensure that the standards are upheld. Because in terms of things like preserving the environment through management of water and energy, of course, being very tied closely again with petroleum resources, it's through the use of such standards that we will enable the Emirate to be able to exploit the petroleum resources externally in the future, which is where we will get the income to continue our diversification. Because, as I said a moment ago, 17 years to 2030 is very quick. Life goes on beyond that. Eventually, I see the Emirate as being a very diverse economy that will have substantial renewable energy forces and also a lot of opportunity for intellectual property development in terms of green materials and innovations for technology for the built environment. But as we lead up to that and we fuel the engine to conquer those tasks, we need to take very careful care of what we have now in the petroleum wealth. Thank you.
Thank you, Holly. A very interesting look at the Plan 2030. I'd like to invite Mr. Maralani to give a brief presentation that he has on identifying how companies are now showing their financial reports, obviously, but more into showing their social and environmental performance. Dr. Shahram.
Thank you. Good afternoon. It's an honor to be present here. What I'm trying to do within these few minutes is to answer probably, or at least start to the thinking process around when we are talking about sustainability standard as part of the question in this panel, how we are going to move forward and how we are going to select the right standards for the society, thinking about the sustainability. If we go some decades back, probably the sustainability for a business could be probably the quality of product or service plus a healthy balance sheet. But today the challenges of society has been changing because of the complexity of the world we are living in. Taking, for example, from the population growth, from the energy security, food security, water, and other supplies, up to the other areas like urbanization or the environmental challenges which we are having. Not only an organization or a business, but also a government is facing a lot of new areas to be addressed. This is probably the main input for thinking how we need to address the sustainability in the society moving forward. Drilling down a little bit to these areas, you may find a little bit of old unknown areas like quality, later probably safety and health of the labor and the society, environmental challenges a little bit after, but then we have been having incidents who have, for example, the 9/11, where the security has been becoming a very major area to be discussed when we are discussing the sustainability concept. Some years later, we have the Fukushima accident, and then it also starts not only to talk about security when we are discussing these kind of risks, but also to address the continuity of the service which we are providing to the society. Then the business continuity is becoming a new area. And within this list, which is so long, you can see many, many different and wide areas which is under the umbrella of sustainability. Then comes the question about what standards. Each of these boxes, which I'm having here, has at least one or more of standards in a region or in a country or global level to address the challenges we are facing and manage the risks around the sustainability. But where to start? The question now is that Abu Dhabi should start from where? The structure of the business and the way we learn the management in the business schools is starting from where the industrial development started in West, and the need for quality probably was inevitable and the start point. But for a society which is completely in a different part of the world with a different business environment, and we are not 50 years ago, we are today at 2013, addressing a different type of challenge in a different type of business environment, there is a concept of applicability, or as they call it now these days in ISO, the materiality of what areas are the priority. This is not only for a business, but also for a society to start with addressing which areas are the priority in the society. Before going into probably thinking a little bit more about the answer to where to start, we have the basics of definition of the sustainable development from '87, talking about meeting the needs of today and tomorrow. A little bit newer definition is directly from the latest standard of ISO addressing sustainability, is talking about the integrity, is talking about the health and prosperity, it's about the quality of life, it's about the social justice, it's about the earth, and also diversity. I was browsing the Vision 2030 of Abu Dhabi, the economic vision, and looking into the 7 basic focus areas in the policy. And you can easily find that the sustainability definition, as per the latest definitions being used in the global community, is very much easily linked to one or more of these areas. The way forward, this is kind of a recommendation because I have seen that the recommendation is also part of the reason to gather for 2 days here. I believe that probably is one of the areas to think is a way forward where we lift the quality and conformity to the level of sustainability and not copying any practice from East or West or anywhere, but to study what's available at the global level, to do the materiality study for the country, for different areas, for example, the governmental businesses, for public sector, for private, and defining the roadmap of sustainability, linking it to the economic vision of 2030 of Abu Dhabi. The second way is to have a working group where they can involve not only the government sector and also the governorate of the Emirate, but also different interested parties, so that they can start this discussion at the Emirate level or at the UAE level, moving forward and defining what are our priorities and how we are going to address the sustainability challenge. And we need, of course, the help of the universities and other institutions in order to educate the local leadership to take the ownership and the leadership of sustainability as we move forward. I was just having a little bit of thinking of who could be on that board. And when today I got this package, I saw that what I was addressing as possible members of such a forum addressing sustainability at the level of Abu Dhabi or the whole Emirates are probably the same as the members of QCC. We have a good start point if we sit together, study what has been done over the last 20 years at the global level, and decide where are the sustainability initiatives that we need to focus and define it for the different sectors in the society. Thank you.
Thank you, Shahram. I think that's a great point in discussing the fact of integrating different government agencies, also non-government agencies as well as private companies, into a forum to discuss, or into a committee to discuss different issues of sustainability that the Emirate may need. I know that there is a lot of different initiatives, such as from the Environmental Agency, and as you mentioned, the QCC really acts as a board to enable different visions of the Emirate, and one of that, of course, is sustainability. Thank you for that. With that, I'd like to welcome Dr. Harold, and I would like to get a more international perspective of this topic that we're talking about. How does sustainability standards get us to a better economy as a developing country?
Thank you very much, Salim. When listening to my co-speeches, I remembered the situation in some 30 years ago when I was a student, and I had a chance to work for the Club of Rome, for the Forum Humanum in those days. And in those days, one of the ideas I followed was to assess life cycle impact of products. And in those days, it was revolutionary. And it was something where when I prepared for that session, I found that the European Commission, meanwhile, has established a rule in which life cycle assessment is now becoming a standard that has been to be followed. And there you see it takes some 30 years from, I would not say I was the first one, but among the first one who discussed this issue, until it has come and evolved through the whole society. And I wouldn't say it has evolved through the society, it has evolved through the leading people within society, because between the guys here on the podium and what we discussed and the normal people who live, it's quite a dramatic distance. So yes, we are on a certain track, but it takes an awful lot of further effort. That's from my perspective. Having been in various industries, in agencies, when I was thinking about Abu Dhabi, I was thinking about a rich country that is privileged because of the oil resources. And yes, there are some very ambitious goals you want to achieve. Now, we have seen standards evolving and coming from a country that has been named as an efficiency country. Germany is well known for efficiency cars, efficiency engineering, things like that. I was focusing on efficiency and asking myself what could be the efficiency, the added value that Abu Dhabi could add to the international community. And I was thinking about what would it be if Abu Dhabi's Quality Council would not only ask for best practice and analyze what other companies and other countries are doing, but looks out for some innovations and helps to speed up these innovations and not only follow standards that has been set by other companies. I may give you an example. I'm working together with somebody who has developed a new water cleaning technology. This technology it hampers, and there are problems to go into the market. And why? Because in all the bids that has been asked for, it was a prerequisite that it is osmotic to clean the water. What if you don't have an osmotic process, but you have a complete different new process? You are out. Before you could give a tender, you are excluded because in the tender documents it is specified that you have to use osmotic processes. So I was thinking, if I would be in the shoes of Abu Dhabi and look around and have the resources at this moment to look around the globe and identify best practices, yes, I would invite talented guys. I would organize, let's say, a sort of fair in Abu Dhabi where new technologies are invited and could present themselves. And maybe, Sally, you're now following my line, that if there are monetary resources, then you could help these new technologies, these innovations to be evolved. And that's, for me, a role that Abu Dhabi could play. I don't want to challenge your sustainability. Holly has said something about this, that maybe you are in a situation, if you just follow the paths that are quite usual at this moment, then the resources might be gone before you have developed a sustainable economy, in a sense that this economy could bear whatever the standard of living at those days is in 2030. For you, just an amazing figure that came in my mind. I was in 1980 roundabout. I was teaching, and there the discussion was going on about the growth in Germany, and we struggled a little bit with the growth rates, and then I looked into what is really the fact. And the fact at those days was that we complained about a growth rate that was 1%. But looking backwards, 1% of the added growth rate in Germany in the 1980s was exactly the gross national product of Germany in 1950. So just the 1% add up was the whole economy in 1950. So sustainability in that sense needs to have somebody who is a sort of a front runner, and this is what I would see as a possibility for Abu Dhabi to differentiate from what the rest of the world is doing.
Thank you, Dr. Harold. Of course, innovation is a very interlinked terminology when we talk about sustainability, and we have an annual event in Abu Dhabi that's the Zayed Energy Prize that speaks about innovation within the fields of sustainability, which is very interlinked to the points that you brought up. Thank you for that. Now I'd like to welcome Ms. Sally Patterson, who can give us sort of a different and unique perspective of how the National Bank of Abu Dhabi is looking at their economic sustainability and environmental sustainability and all the initiatives that they have within their organization. Please, Sally.
Thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. The one plus point of going last in any panel is that hopefully I'll be able to pull together all of the themes of my co-panelists. So here we go. Let's start and see where we get to. Okay. It's not often that people think about banks being sustainable, so I wanted to start the presentation by actually giving you a quote from our chief executive. And hopefully it will flip your view. In sustainability is exactly what we're about, and really is the core of how we do business. And if we don't do it in a sustainable way, then actually we don't have a future. I've got at the bottom of the slide some areas where I'm going to focus on, but I want to start with a little bit of a tongue-in-cheek message for this audience. And I recognise that you all understand sustainability, but I'm absolutely amazed that when I talk broadly about sustainability, people still confuse what it is about and think that it is about charitable donations or humanitarian relief. And as much as I would love to look like Angelina Jolie, as you will see, I don't. So actually I've got much broader things to think about than a Hollywood actress. And really what that comes down to for me is how do we deliver true stakeholder value that's going to support the future growth of the National Bank of Abu Dhabi, and as such has to tie in to the future growth of Abu Dhabi and the Emirates itself. And that's really where I'm going to focus on. Okay, like the gentleman this morning, I'm actually not going to apologise for the complexity of this slide. And you don't really need to be able to read all of the risks associated with that. But what you can see is that we are operating in an increasingly complex and high-risk environment. The blue areas, by the way, align to the financial aspects. So no surprises there in terms of liquidity crisis, systemic financial crisis, imbalances across the globe. And that's where we need to be thinking about, particularly if we're about supporting the growth of Abu Dhabi, and we are. So let me try and break that down into a little bit more closer detail for you. Okay, top 5 global risks in terms of likelihood, okay, and severe, apologies for that, severe income disparity, okay, challenges in terms of countries at the moment, actually looking in terms of the challenges that we've had in terms of Arab Spring, chronic financial imbalances. Think about where we're going with euro at the moment and what that looks like in terms of there. So when we talk about the likelihood of these things happening, actually they're already happening. They're here. They're part of the environment that we need to live with. And if we then think about the impact that those things are happening, major systemic financial failure. Okay? How can we possibly talk about sustainable growth, economic growth, investing into the livelihoods of people, thinking about education, health, and all the rest of it, if we've got these kind of major challenges? And unfortunately, some of the banks are at the centre of this. It was quite interesting when we were talking this morning about international models and best practices. You know, nobody, I think, has failed to sort of be part of seeing LIBOR scandals, international banks mis-selling products to their customers, fines from regulators. So there's a little bit for me around maybe actually we don't want to be going too far into international banks and standards. Maybe we need to be thinking about other standards that are right for us. But there's definitely something that we need to be mindful of, and that is going to be around increased regulation and requirements on disclosure and transparency. And trust will not increase into the banking system without that. I fully agree that we have to have standards. I guess the bit that I would say is, though, they've got to be fit for purpose and they've got to support growth. They can't put cement in the veins of an emerging economy in terms of what that looks like. But in terms of sustainability, it's not all about mitigating risks or the downside. There are some big opportunities for sustainable banks. Just recently, a major study by the Global Alliance on Banking Values has highlighted that sustainable banks actually perform significantly better than some of the global banks that you would think would be leaders in the industry. So they normally attract better quality capital, they have better return on assets, better return on equity, higher growth opportunities. So there really is something about doing things in the right way that actually comes back to supporting the customers and the economies that we serve. So specifically for Abu Dhabi, what does this look like for us in terms of local opportunities? And as the National Bank, we are in absolutely no doubt at all that our alignment of strategic growth has to tie in with the Abu Dhabi 2030 vision, which we believe positively supports sustainable thinking and action. We've already talked about, and Holly mentioned, the diversification of industries, and we actually need a very, very strong financial background to that to attract investment, to attract money, and to attract money at a price that we want to pay. So when we look at ratings for the banks, when we look at how much we can raise from international countries through bond issues, through coups or whatever that looks like, we need to attract that money in and at an acceptable price, because ultimately, if we can't, we have to pay that rate back to our customers. We know at the moment that we're a consumer society. You know, that isn't just about Abu Dhabi. It definitely is about a global phenomenon that's happening at the moment. But we need to encourage people to save for the future. But why would you save if you think that your savings aren't going to be there in 3 or 5 or 10 years' time when you need them? You know, why would you save if you think the market is going to crash in another 3 or 5 years' time? So I think there is something about being transparent, giving more information to investors to encourage them in. We talked about SME, a massive area of opportunity. I know there's a huge session tomorrow and we'll be part of that. But here's the bit for me, and I think a gentleman said before in Germany that SMEs are about 90% of the economy. That's also true for most countries. There was a headline the other day that one of the reasons that Spain is struggling at the moment is because about 450,000 SMEs have gone out of business as a result of the challenges that they're facing. SMEs are the backbone in terms of economic strength for the country, but also an opportunity for employment, really supporting social inclusion as well. We see women as a huge opportunity, and very, very pleased to see recently legislation to have women on boards, which is a massive step forward, again, ahead of some international countries. And obviously we heard before in terms of real estate and investment what that looks like. And National Bank of Abu Dhabi is very proud to say we've made a commitment in terms of our Pearl rating system for all of the properties that we own and invest in. Okay. How do you pull this all together? What does this really mean? Because sometimes when you're trying to establish things, it's difficult to actually see the wood for the trees. What we have done in National Bank of Abu Dhabi is to actually focus the work that we're doing on sustainability into 6 broad themes. And this is where the rubber hits the road. This is our real task of commitment to sustainability around building long-term business opportunities. Because I want to come back to, again, I'm not Angelina Jolie. I'm about adding commercial value to the bottom line of the National Bank of Abu Dhabi. And this strategy that we've set is actually aligned to this broader strategic growth strategy of the bank. It is about us contributing to build a sustainable economy. It is about balancing social and economic development. So that definitely ties into our investment of SMEs. We opened 10 specific business centres last year. We'll continue to invest more in that. Yes, I do see huge amount of development in women. If only you can't be successful if you're excluding 50% of the people who can really make a contribution. We're very, very proud to have tied that in with social investment, and we recently opened the Al Ain call centre, which is staffed entirely by UAE national women. And that ties into the people, investing in our people at the bottom. Yeah, Abu Dhabi Economic Vision 2030 has to get to below 5% unemployment. You can't do it if you exclude 50% of the people who are on your unemployment register. Quite interesting, we talk about efficient markets being pivotal pivotal to growth, and that's where we really see that we play a strength in terms of attracting money into Abu Dhabi in the UAE, and also as we manage our international growth plans, what that looks like for trade and investment flows, and we really see that we have a major role there. That is crucial for us having a strong rating agency ranking, and crucial for people seeing us as one of the 50 safest banks. So if we talk about standards and recognising fit-for-purpose standards, that really ties into there. I think, you know, there's a whole host of aspects around it being environmentally smarter, UN principles of responsible investing, we're looking at equator principles, and there's a huge amount, but it's how do we pull this together to really translate into new ideas that add value, and that's definitely where I would tie into the bit of innovation and quality. Final bit for me about, before I move on, I find it amazing. We talked about certification and accreditation this morning. Nobody would go into a plane and have a pilot that's not certified. But we find that people will give their life savings, their pensions, even the commitment of a 20-year mortgage to financial advisors who are not qualified. And that's one thing that National Bank of Abu Dhabi is absolutely committed to in terms of certifying and crediting people, so that when we talk to people, our customers can have that reassurance. Okay, what does that look like for us? It's all about growth. Okay? We talked about the journey of Abu Dhabi, and this is our journey in terms of building awareness, our commitment. We talk about who's going to hold us accountable in terms of standards. We actually start with ourselves, because that's also where our stakeholders, our customers, the regulator, everybody will hold us accountable. So it really is about getting that right first and foremost. It is about change, and then the final one the gentleman here talked about, we're now on materiality. Where do we really focus? SMEs, women, economic and social investment. And no surprise, ladies and gentlemen, that by doing that, we've actually seen the profit and the rating of the bank increase over the years. And it's our commitment to see that continue for the good of Abu Dhabi. Thank you.
Thank you, Sally. Very interesting presentation in terms of how different organizations are taking in sustainability. Unfortunately, Angelina Jolie rejected to be with us on the panel today, but we can do well without her, I guess. I'd like to address a question to Dr. Kamal about sustainability indicators. What are sustainability indicators? How can we get them, and how can we prioritize them?
I think there are various attempts to develop sustainability indicators. So if you take the life cycle we talked about, if you produce a product, first of all, I think people at the moment are concerned just about certain aspects of the life cycle. So they may have a product that, say, Coke can, that's disposed of in the disposal system, and they look at that part of the equation, not from the time that you got the raw material, you designed it, you manufactured it, you used it, and then you got rid of it. So the whole footprint is needed. And I think the footprint is one area where an indicator can be developed. And what is happening in Europe, for example, the biggest emphasis is on developing a footprint that will provide best practice guide for SMEs. So SMEs are at the heart of their thinking, saying, how can we help SMEs to become more thoughtful about sustainability right from the beginning, look at the whole equation, and provide them with the tools that they can use. So all to do with providing tools that SMEs can use and use it easily, and then implement it in their product, services, and supply. Thank you.
So talking about SMEs using sustainability indicators, or different organizations using sustainability indicators, I'd like to ask Holly Chant a question on corporate social responsibility. How important is that for organizations today, specifically within Abu Dhabi? Do you see organizations going towards CSR initiatives, or are we lacking that?
I've recently seen, as I mentioned to you earlier, Solomon, probably about the past year, that there's a real significant creative approach now to CSR by companies that's starting to develop. Previously, we more saw social responsibility when organizations were really following and complying to regulations such as we have seen in the form of the Estidama mandate, which required all built environment projects to have minimum levels of sustainability. I think that there is a huge opportunity to achieve a lot of goals that relate to innovation, that relate to true economic sustainability by really plowing into CSR. And like my colleague said, it's not just about giving. It's not just charitable. This is about a strategic approach to understanding how really being a contemporary business, meaning that you mind how you treat the environment, you mind how you treat your employees, disadvantaged people in our community, that you really, really consider that you have an obligation to give back, but that's not a burden, but that it's a strategic opportunity. And time again, when you study this internationally, you see that it proves it's valid to pursue. Now, I think in Abu Dhabi in particular, because the Abu Dhabi has really consistently led the way in the Gulf for the movement of sustainability, and whether you want to classify it under CSR or sustainability in the built environment or in other business practices, Abu Dhabi has consistently led the game here. And I think that Abu Dhabi, in terms of diversifying into the rest of the Gulf and having greater economic impact, can use what we've learned here through our earlier initiatives with CSR and Estidama to take advantage of other countries that want to follow our leadership, and that we can, by setting an example with CSR, show how it means good business. CSR is simply good business, and if it's not for you, then you need to re-examine how you're actually running your program. So I'm very excited about the opportunities of CSR in Abu Dhabi and for the work of your council.
Perfect. So talking about the Emirate and Abu Dhabi, I would like to ask Shahram, in your opinion, what do you think the Plan 2030 should prioritize?
I believe looking into the, for example, the area of expertise from our organization is around the global best practices. We are having 7 core subjects being addressed today in the ISO, for example, in how sustainability can be looked upon in different organizations or countries. It starts with organizational governance, which can be, in general terms, also translated into the governance in general in an emirate, for example. Then back to the first question also, the indicators can start from here, that how the general governance is functioning in a business entity or in a ministry, etc. Second one is human rights. The level of priority in an organization can be less, in a country can be more, because what an organization can do, for example, is less, and if it is a simple business, and more to when we are talking about government. Third one is about the labor practices. Labor practices standards, we have different standards at the regional level and expectations in European Union, in US, in East, in Far East, and that's the third area where we are addressing, discussing about the focus area. Of course, environment is a little bit older. Many people know about the environment, and there are enormous amount of initiatives around the world. What fits for UAE and specifically for Abu Dhabi is something that probably a forum, this forum, or in a way the sustainability-related setup can address. Then is about the fair operating procedures. Talking about the fair operating procedures, it can be from the competitiveness of the entities in the market and all the other areas, which links directly to the governance setup of an industry or a city or a government. It's about the consumer issues. Consumer issues, I think, is more linked to the product specifications. Then we go a little bit further down and detail to the level of specifications of services, what are the expectations from different levels of society and different stakeholders. And the last one is about the community involvement and the development of the society, so that the society takes more and more the ownership of sustainability in the way they live.
Thank you. Speaking about collaborative governance, my next question is to Dr. Harold. When we were briefly discussing the Economic Vision 2030, you noticed that there wasn't a lot of emphasis on actual environmental sustainability, but there was a lot on economic sustainability. Now, there's different government agencies working on different plans from now till 2030. We have the Urban Planning Council working on the Urban Plan Vision for 2030, the Economic Vision, as we're seeing today on the 2030 Economic Vision, as well as the environmental agencies also working on an environmental initiative. In your opinion, how do these things tie up together? And do we need a singular, larger vision towards sustainability?
I don't think that you need a broader or larger vision. I think the integration, when you manage to put the various pieces together, if you are open-minded and don't overrule, let's say, by economic growth rates, and you want to push that one because this is in the focus. If you don't overrule the environmental guys, if you have a share podium on which these various views can be exchanged, then it should be enough. We all see that meanwhile green industry, green investments, be it on the level of the banks or be it on the business where I am in, photovoltaic and wind energy. This is something that contributes. What amazed me when I read through the Vision 2030 was the very small amount of renewable energy that you have foreseen for 2030. So if I would make a point, then I would put the point there. The front-runner principle, what I mentioned, is something that you should incorporate, and front-runner means, for example, in the European Union, we want to have 30% of renewable energy within the time frame where you want to have 7%. And going back to what I said, that in my views, I view you are an economy that could put resources in a certain way that you are asking not for what has been delivered in other countries, but you are demanding and you push forward. And so I think, yes, you should go for the more renewable energy and push your industry in that direction. And for example, the zero emission standard that the European demands for all new buildings in the European Union could be adopted and could be topped in a way where the Europeans stand back a little bit. The new buildings in the European Union or in Germany is 1%. So you put a very high standard on 1%, but what is with all the existing buildings and how we could save energy in that one? And if you don't introduce a front-runner principle that you say if there is a renovation in an existing building and you learn from the lessons that have been achieved there and you put this as a standard from there on for all the new renovations on existing buildings, then you lose momentum. And I would strongly argue, if you ask me personally, I would strongly argue install from Quality Council, install a front-runner principle, a very broad one.
Thank you. Sai, my next question comes to you. You heard that Holly and Dr. Harold have are thinking that encouraging more regulation towards renewables is a better solution for the Emirate. What are your opinions from that coming from the private sector?
absolutely support it, and we talked before about the private sector having a role, particularly banks, in terms of financing this and what it looks like. So I think we have a role, I think we have a responsibility, but we've got to do it in a sustainable way, which means that the opportunities have got to stand up to scrutiny in terms of being viable over a longer period of time. And I think that's the challenge where banks and the government need to come together in some of the aspects that we talked about, Khalifa Fund this morning, that we give people the opportunity to step into new industries, new sustainable energy, whether that be solar panels, wind farms, salination, water, whatever it is, recognizing that maybe at a first instance they may not stand up to full financial scrutiny. And that's where I think the real partnership of working together and supporting this for the long-term good of the economy has to come in. And we need to find a way to do that.
Excellent. Okay. On that note, we're a little bit over time with the session. However, we can take one or two questions from the audience if anyone has any questions. Sir.
Good afternoon to all of you. It's such an interesting, subject to be part of. I would like to elaborate on one point. I'm an environmental expert, and one of the things sometimes we face is the fact that when you want to introduce a new initiative, that would be sustainable. You will realize that in sustainability there is a value, there's money savings. And for a specific example, I want to talk about energy efficiency. Problem is, there's no financial mechanism that support these initiatives, because the risk may not be acceptable. And then you sometimes want to introduce something, but there is a lack of standards for what, what's considered environmentally sustainable product, for people to bring it in. These are two challenges we face, and I don't know if anyone can give us a solution, especially our colleagues from the banks.
I think that just aligns to the question that we've just been asked, which is, how can we get banks and government or other funding agencies to look at products in a way that we can support areas where they would not normally perhaps stack up in the way that a bank would want it to on full commercial terms. And at the moment, we have some ways of doing that. We work very strongly in the SME market with the Khalifa Fund. We are always open to the innovation, and you can see that that was one of our pillars into our sustainability strategy. But we're a commercial organisation at the end of the day, and I think this is something, maybe there's a session tomorrow specifically on SMEs, and maybe in that workshop we can look at how much more do we need to find those opportunities that we can then give to people, so that we can really drive forward innovation rather than it halting for the lack of finance, and recognising, as I said, it's got to be done in a commercial way. So maybe tomorrow's that opportunity.
I think if I may just add to that, this is where standards and measurement can play a very important part. So I give one example, and that is that in solar cell photovoltaics cells, there is a big issue about how do you measure the efficiency of the cell. So if you're selling as a producer, manufacturer, you have a product, your competing manufacturer has another product, and the customer in the market is confused. They don't know which one to believe. So unless there are proper measurement and standards which are available, no one can guarantee, even the banks cannot guarantee. And so that is very underpinning, and that's where some of the work that you could start in terms of looking at where Abu Dhabi could contribute is getting involved in the development of the standards and measurement technologies that will give you the answer that you're looking for. They're not easy answers, they're not cheap, and they're not going to come in a short time. But at least you'll get the first order kind of answer from this kind of activity, which are sometimes going on internationally. And for Abu Dhabi to participate in such activities would be a great thing. Thank you.
We have one more question.
Thank you very much, all of you. Yusuf Al-Janebi, QCC. I think this topic is really interesting for everybody, and everybody is aware a little bit from different aspects about sustainability and how to be environmental oriented. Dr. Harold mentioned something about zero emission building. What I know, zero emission usually in the oil industry or gas industry, one of their KPIs, one of their standards is to make zero emission. But for building, it's something I think it's very advanced. Can you give us examples from Germany? How many buildings now following that 1% you mentioned?
As I said, I'm not an expert in that field. I'm not a construction engineer. All I can tell you is that I've seen and wrote about these standards in which the European Union defines a directive, the European Directive 4008, if I remember correctly. And this defines that from 2020 onwards, the emissions coming out from a house or a new building or a factory should be zero. For sustaining that, the German government, for example, has developed a law under which 15% or even more percentage of the energy consumed within a building should be based on renewable energy. You could solve this by putting some solar panels on the roof. You could solve this by connecting to a district heating, to a combined power and heat engine or something like that. It is open up to you how you manage it, but it is a requirement. And in addition, for example, but this goes into very specific German law, in Germany you may have heard that the consumers pay for the solar energy and for the wind energy, the renewable energy. Same should apply to industry, but if industry follows a line which is certified that an energy engineer comes in and reduces the energy you use, and you get a certification on that. You don't need to have zero emissions and zero energy consumption, but if you are on track, if you show and demonstrate that you reduce your energy consumption, then you don't have to pay that subsidy. Yeah? So it's a sort of rewarding. So it's complicated, and this has to be developed in the specific countries. Yeah? But I guess you could put standards on how much energy from inside a building should be capable in penetrating outside, and how do you use systems to recover the energy within the buildings. There are systems in place, and I can tell you, while the European Union is discussing the zero emission building, the architects and those who are front runners, they build active energy houses. They sell energy from the houses into the public grid. Yeah? So zero is something what the European Union aims in 2020, but if you really take everything, all the pieces together and combine them, you can today build active houses.
Thank you, Dr. Harold. With that, unfortunately, this is a topic that we can go on for hours and hours talking about it, but unfortunately we need to close the session because there's another session after this. So I'd like to thank the panel on their great contribution within this session and thank the participants for their attendance. Thank you.